Welcome to Crossing Face. I'm John Pinna, and today we have Matthew Hawkins, one of the founders of Crossing Face. Look who's crawling back. Back. Back to the box.
Crawling back.
It's like look who came through the door.
On my knees, John. Please let me back on the podcast.
I was gonna say like covered in wet from the rain, and asking for a blanket, but I have no idea how any of that works. But no, it's I'm overjoyed that you're back in the IRF space and back in as a guest here, coming to hang out and spend some time. So welcome.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me back. This is long overdue, and grateful to get back on the screen and the mic with you. It's my career has taken some zigzags since you and I first met in Washington. Some listeners might remember me and know all that backstory, but the short of it is I'm back in the international religious freedom space full time, having joined an organization called IRF Secretariat, which is an administrative support body for the global movement for religious freedom. And it's springs out of the context in which you and I met, which was the
Right.
IRF Roundtable. The Crossing Phase really is one of the kind of spin-offs in many respects of what happens at the roundtable. So glad to be back with you today. And I got to tell the listeners, if you haven't seen John recently, he shaved, and it threw us all for a loop. He recently, it was your 50th birthday, right?
Yeah,
50,
it was.
right?
It was.
And I thought, and I got the notice, the announcement of your birthday, and I thought, no way, John's 50. He's way older than that.
Right. True enough. Yeah. And I had that beard for 10 years, and I hadn't shaved. So I just wanted to see my face.
Right.
And of course, it was pretty shocker. I mean, the problem is that I never had a face for TV. It was always a face for radio. And then I shave, and I'm going, God, it didn't do anything.
Right.
It's still radio, and maybe even like second-rate radio, so like cassettes or 8-track. I don't even know. So
I saw you shaved. I was like, wait, who is this? Where'd the beard go?
Yeah, I mean, but you've always looked the same. I mean, like I don't think you've looked the same from when I met you way back.
Yeah, I have a baby face.
You do. You have a baby face, and so I don't know what's going on.
I have the face of a 30-year-old and the cardiology of an 80-year-old. So somehow those cancel each other out.
I know. Yeah, you're. I mean, and that was part of the reason why you had to leave was, you decided to leave the DC areas was you got the Widowmaker and but you survived it. You which is an amazing feat in itself. And then sort of got back to the basics. You went back to Tennessee, making sure that you worshipped at the Parthenon, the Athena
Don't
there.
tell people that.
Well, whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that actually happened. I'm just saying that you did actually go back to Tennessee, and you did go. You are in Nashville, where the Parthenon is.
Yes,
where the life-size statue or larger than life statue of Athena is, and now you're healed and coming back to the IRF space. I'm not. So
for context, dear listener, Nashville historically has been known as, quote, the Athens of the South, and one of the previous World's Fairs.
Yeah, the one at turn of the 20th.
They erected a full-sized replica of the Parthenon, in which includes, like John mentioned, it's got to be 2 or 3 story tall statue of Athena. In which she has one of her hands raised, like as a platform, and holds in her hand, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I think it's Nike.
It could be Nike. If you look at the face though of the statue, it's strangely similar to Matthew.
Right.
So like I'm not saying it is.
That statue looks really small when you're looking at Athena, but in reality, if you stood next to it, it's at least full size, if not like 9 feet tall. So the statue in her hand is, huge. And it's always been part of Pinna's pipe dream here to host the Crossing Phase at the Parthenon at the feet of Athena.
Yeah, I figured that the optics must be great, and who knows what may or may not happen. but you had, had stepped out of the DC space. I mean, the Beltway is stressful, and it's the demands are high. And the problem is that when you're in the Beltway, like I lived on 25th and Penn, and so I was always walking to Main State or the Ike building.
Yeah.
And because I was in proximity, I would get called for so many things, and or pre or post meetings where people would come and say, can we talk about, or can we do this? Or I need somebody else to be.
Yeah, sure.
And so your schedule is just, it's like, it's an high, let it fly. And when you're young, no one cares about, what's going on. And then you're accessible. That creates a whole nother situation. So you took a break and went back, may or not have meddled in the dark arts at the Parthenon temple. And then, and now you're back. I don't, and you're, what, 3 or 4 inches taller?
Right.
So we're not sure what's going on.
I would welcome a height increase. That'd be great. Right. But yeah, DC, as you mentioned, it's an up tempo, wall-to-wall scheduled kind of culture, and it was fun for a period of time. And but you're right. But sometimes you can kind of get lost in it and kind of forget about it. And you were asking me if I'm still drinking coffee or not. I am drinking coffee, but at a significantly reduced volume relative to our days on the Hill, for sure.
That was the segue into this.
For both health and sanity reasons. I love my coffee, but it's not. I'm not having the 4 or 5 caffeinated beverages or espresso drinks a day that I was having towards the latter end of my DC stay. So Middle Tennessee was a good place to kind of recover from like you said, surviving a Widowmaker heart attack. I had made plans to steer into some academics, and so I studied some theology for several years at one of our Baptist seminaries. It was a really richly rewarding experience, and then survived heart surgery. That was a further derailment of
I remember that when you went for a checkup.
Best laid plans. That's a whole story in itself. Yeah. But God willing, I've survived that. Had survived a heart attack at age 40, and then went through bypass surgery at age 43. I recommend gentlemen getting your cholesterol checked. Women too, but men of a certain age in particular, get that cholesterol checked, because I had a genetic disposition that I was unaware of, blissfully. And then I did a stint for a few years in Christian publishing.
You read some Christian publishing books.
Yeah. So, and that was really rewarding. That got me back in the swing of kind of working for a corporation and corporate life, and working with a team, and learned a lot of great skills in that. I was kind of recruited into that acquisitions editor position. I was like, y'all know who I am, right? I'm like this, policy, theology, DC kind of career bent. I've never edited a book, right? I've edited a lot of short papers, a lot of one-pagers, a lot of congressional letters, a lot of advocacy letters, right? Multi-phase stuff. I did a master's. I've done a lot of writing and a lot of editing. I was like, but doing a full book, I was like, I've not done that. But they were like, well, we think you have transferable skills. Right. And they were right about that. I was, pretty familiar with Christian, Protestant, and evangelical subculture here in America, and enough of a theology training to be fairly competent at editing a book. And as you know what we did in DC, it's a lot of relationship management and relationship building, and that's what you're doing with the publishing company with authors, is relationship management. And so once I saw kind of that overlay with my skill set, I decided, went into that, and that was good for a period of time, and a really great team that I got to work with, and a lot of great authors with some projects I'm pretty proud of having worked on. But long term, I finally came to the conclusions that I wanted to be back in this kind of space, something to do broadly with religion and public life, which is where most of my career has been spent, and what really gets me excited. And I do get that kind of fix in a volunteer capacity with the One America movement, which is an organization that trains predominantly faith communities to navigate what we call toxic polarization in America, and try to help Americans hate each other less. That's a whole stint. We probably ought to have on our CEO Andy Hanauer to talk more about that. But it's that has been really richly rewarding. Again, it's a very multi-faith oriented kind of work. But I was kind of scratching my head, like, but I recognized that serving in that capacity was really richly rewarding for me personally and professionally. I was like, why am I not doing more of this with my day job? And so I started sending out several emails to folks expressing interest in kind of broadly returning to this religion and public life space. And thankfully, our mutual friend Greg Mitchell responded, and among some other folks, but he had a position open at this organization called IRF Secretariat, and um, so the opportunity here checked a bunch of boxes that I was looking for, but the idea that I could step back into the IRF space where you and I spent so much time and met and still know so many people was pretty exciting for me. So that's where I am now, and yeah, it's like I'm crawling back, saying, "John, let me back on the podcast."
No, I asked you back on, but
I know.
it's one of those things where, admittedly, I mean, we talk about the space a lot, and the challenge is that, the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, and that set up the IRF office, the International Religious Freedom Office, and the IRF ambassadorship, and so the mechanisms at state at USAID, which is now defunct, and USERF, the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom, and of course in a position at the NSC level, but then the industry, there was all these informal elements, and one of the informal elements was the International Religious Freedom, the IRF Roundtable,
Yeah.
and then from there, the dream of the IRF Roundtable was to have state host governments, and that was the ministerial in 2017, where all the governments came in and met with civil society and government, and that's to project international religious freedom and freedom of religion and belief globally. And then you have Brownback, who was the ambassador, now has the IRF Summit, but then the round table still exists as the round table, but the mechanism behind that now is the IRF Secretariat, which is what you now are the senior vice president,
Executive vice president.
executive vice president of now, and so that operationalizes the round table. And so maybe we should just chat a little bit about like what it does, because you touched tangentially mentioned the participant-led letters and briefing docs and stuff like that. But what are the three core functions of the IRF Secretariat as it stands right now?
Yeah, I think we look at the religious freedom movement broadly into three categories. Greg calls them buckets, but we have advocacy, engagement, and then building. And so what you recognize, and what a lot of people in the religious freedom community recognize, is that since the passage of that IRF Act in '98 or whenever it was, the foregoing 25 years, religious freedom in a lot of places around the globe has actually gotten worse. And so there's a sense that those of us, pardon me, there's a sense of among those of us, particularly in the West, who've been doing this work for a really long time, that advocacy alone, particularly in Western countries with Western governments, really doesn't seem to be changing the trend line in a meaningful way. And by advocacy, we mean it's nothing pejorative. It just means we're typically in the advocacy space raising awareness to particular incidents, particular violations of religious freedom in a particular country, particular prisoners of conscience, particular, and then we're trying to elevate that and try to get most of the time, Western governments to, apply some form of foreign policy pressure and diplomatic pressure on to those foreign governments, and that has a place and needs to continue. And we always need that component, but we work of the conviction that there are other complementary strategies that need to follow the advocacy portion of that. And one is something we call cooperative engagement, which is number one, shaping the advocacy in a way that invites or opens the door to reformers or potential reformers within a particular country and a foreign government to dialogue
Right.
and in a charitable and good faith way. You can't always do that all the time, but there are ways to do advocacy and try to get folks down an avenue of cooperative engagement that is more fruitful. It's longer term work, right? But we believe it's an opportunity to actually move the needle a little bit. And then that third term, building, is really opportunities to help build religious freedom from the ground up with what Greg calls builders, which is local leaders who are acquainted with the culture and the nuances and all the details that those in another country are not going to be familiar with, and be able to identify potential reformers within a particular government to work with over the long term. So that's kind of how we at the Secretariat see things and are trying to advance that. That's kind of broad strategy. But as far as like what our primary goal is or our primary responsibility is, we convene the IRF Roundtable in Washington, D.C. We make sure that happens, and both in person in hybrid meetings and then also online more frequently. Where it's a multi-faith gathering, as you know, it's held with a certain set of rules and best practices, and you stimulate this pretty open-handed, good faith collaboration on religious freedom, folks, and or religious freedom activities.
Right, but anybody can participate.
Anybody can participate.
You have a meeting on Monday, for example. If someone wanted to listen or participate, they could go to the IRF Secretariat site, right, the Roundtable site, and they can just sign up, and they would get a call in or Zoom or whatever, and they could participate and listen in and see what's going on, and just maybe walk through the agenda just briefly, just kind of like broad strokes. Like Monday, you're going to sit at 11 o'clock and do what?
Yeah. We'll meet on Monday. At the time of this recording, we're recording on a Friday. We're talking about a Monday gathering in person on Capitol Hill. We'll meet in the Hart Senate building, and we will have, especially when we're live in person in DC, we always do meetings with U.S. government, which means the first portion of the agenda includes reports and engagement with U.S. government. Meaning specifically the International Religious Freedom Office at the State Department, and then also the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom always send representatives to talk about and give updates from their work and engage in Q&A with civil society, the non-governmental organizations like us. And then the second portion is all agenda items by civil society folks, from Christians to Muslims to Hindus, Baha'is. It's, you and I, we always kind of affectionately refer to the Roundtable as the bar scene in Star Wars. Why is that? Because no two aliens look alike, right? Which is, or at least that's our perception of it.
Pejorative sense, like,
right? Yeah.
Ice crashing the scene right now.
Yeah. And so participants bring updates from different particular countries, whether it's Nigeria or East Asia or Russia or India or South America, and they're often advancing what we call participant-led initiatives, which are often multi-faith letters. We use the term multi-faith as opposed to interfaith because nobody's trying to lump all religions into the same thing or trying to blur the lines. We recognize that we all believe very different and often irreconcilable things, and yet we all have reason, both doctrinally and philosophically and maybe theologically, but certainly practically speaking, we all have skin in the game, and our co-believers, regardless of what religion we are, someone in our tribe, so to speak, someone in our faith is a minority, and often an oppressed minority somewhere around the globe.
Sure.
No religion is immune from that somewhere in the globe. Certainly there are places that are better than better than others for everybody, but there are often places that are particularly bad for a lot of different people. And so you have advocacy groups from across faith groups or from across political allegiances collaborating on really narrow, discrete issues, often raising the attention of an issue to State Department and the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And other policymakers and other influential
and supporting
folks.
each other.
And then, and this thing's been going on, as you know, for 15 years, which is pretty remarkable for what's mostly an ad hoc gathering of a really of people who don't agree on a whole lot of things. And so we're taking that, and then the other responsibility for IRF Secretariat is to replicate that model in other places around the globe. And we've, I think since 2019, and my understanding is I'm kind of new to the data, the internal organization data, but we've stimulated something like 40 different roundtables around the globe. And also then trying to set up other secretariats like us. So basically other administrative support bodies who then would bear the responsibility. Again, local builders, regional folks who are familiar. So it's not us merely as Americans trying to replicate this, but that there's local ownership and support for roundtables. And so that's basically the gist of what we do.
Yeah, and that's how we met. We have a real strong relationship. It's funny, when we first started the podcast, people were like, "Oh, these two guys hate each other. They're being nice online just to talk about the issues and joking, but they really want to kill each other afterwards." I remember like the comments like that, and I'm like, I don't know, like you and I have had even you've been out of the IRF space for a long time, and we still communicate on a regular basis, and it's not about issues. It's not like I call you up and go, what are we going to do about this guy Paul who wrote 90% of the Bible? Like, no, I don't.
He's still So for those of you who've longtime listeners with Crossing Phase, John still heckles me about the writings of Paul via text, even though it has nothing to do with the podcast.
Yeah, it has absolutely nothing to do with it. So, but I just no, it's one of those things where we are able to disagree. Pretty much, theological lines, we disagree quite a bit, I would think.
Yes.
The apologists, the Matthew apologists, the Hawkians, we would call them, are the guy. They would say, well, he's an evangelical, so he's constantly trying to evangelize John. And so that's why he keeps interacting with him. And
they're not wrong, John. Jesus loves you. We know this.
Yeah, listen, I'm all about Hazadisa. I'm all about his love. I'm all about it. I'm not denying that. But it would be one of those things where everybody thought we were like kind of. It was for
show, right? People thought this was for show and not
yeah, and it wasn't genuine. But the fact is that you and I had built a really long-standing relationship based on the roundtable model, where you and I would be, we would have a participant-led letter, and then we'd be trying to figure out, how do we support each other on the letter, or can we support it? Is there something that's going on? Can we change some wording? Can we add things in or take things away? And so those were the things that were just. That really where you and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we could make it work for the IRF agenda, because we were people of faith that believed in religious freedom, and then I don't know kind of how it worked, but it's like a pluralist that happens to be something, right? And so that kind of is how it kind of works when you step in that space. Then doesn't mean you're not advocating for your own groups. Right. But you're also starting trying to advocate for the agenda, and the idea of trying to say, like, how can I support, and trying to eliminate all the try to get to the no's and eliminate the no's so that we can collaborate, because the next time we might need, you might need my help with something.
Yeah.
And then a lot of that was just like, the DC shuffle, where it's like, do you have a contact here, or do you know what's going on here, or do you know this group, or can we figure out what we're going to do here? And some of it was just mechanical stuff, where it's like, they sent in a terrible letter. How do we talk?
How do we fix this?
Yeah, how do we talk about grammar? Like, or in the same respect, it's like, what's going on in this country? Do you have any contacts? Yeah. And this is what we're hearing. We don't have geotagged photographs. We don't have,
Yeah.
any proof of this other than some anecdotal stuff. So how do we verify this stuff? And so,
yeah, the verification stuff is really, really a challenge, and that's why you kind of
yeah,
need a broad network of people you trust to do this kind of work, because you're hearing such and such about something in a country, and you're really reliant on relationships that you've built with people who are professional and credible and have a reputation in the space, and what organization they're working for, and that cuts across faiths. Like I don't care whether you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim. Like every Christian or every religious organization has that challenge. It's not like one religion has an instantaneous global network of stuff they can confirm,
sure.
and that's broadly speaking. And so we still have to ask those kinds of questions of some of our domestic U.S. friends when we have a participant or someone who wants to participate in a roundtable from another country, and they say, "Hey, I'm with such and such religion in this space," and it's your domestic folks probably don't know this person, but you're kind of like,
Right.
do these credentials do they resonate? Do they sound credible within your
Right.
within your orbit? I had that kind of conversation just this week
Yeah.
with some folks. So you're kind of, to be fruitful and productive in the public policy space, you really do have to have a broad network of folks to help you refine and like you say, verify things, make it credible. And then I came away from that work and re-enter that work having an appreciation for how writing a good advocacy letter, and
Sure.
particularly if you're trying to attract a multi-faith, nonpartisan,
You're trying to
bipartisan
get signatures, and
audience and signatures. Like there's an art to doing that. Not everybody. It's not always intuitive, and you're best served by drafting the thing and then getting some feedback from some trusted friends who, whether or not they're going to sign it or not. And you always want that sucker to be short. 1 page, 2 max. But you got some folks who want to like bring a whole white paper to like. Capitol Hill folks are just not going to read all that. Like you need to have that. That's the front loaded,
Yep.
top line, scannable, make it legible, and some things. Sometimes you have to leave details out that your organization would endorse because you're asking for a slew of signatures, right? And not all those signatures are going to feel comfortable putting their name on something that has even just a sentence that they can't really verify, right? And so you have to kind of hold some of that stuff lightly, even if I say as a Baptist, am still going to like maybe supplement the letter with a white paper or some kind of larger body of research on Capitol Hill folks if they want it, right? But those sign-on letters, they got to be succinct, precise, and really aimed at, like you said, gathering signatures.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to build that community of concern around something, particularly if it's not well written, short, to the point, and then it doesn't have the support materials that you need. And so, but and the other thing is, it doesn't help if you don't have any relationships,
Right.
because nobody's going to sign on your letter, because people are going to say, "Is this credible? Is it this? Is it that?" And so forth.
Do you, stuff we learned in kindergarten. Do you play well with others, right?
Right.
And you can, not everybody can sign on to every letter, and everybody, that's part of the best practice too, is that you can't hold a grudge to a particular person or organization because they didn't support your particular letter at a particular time.
Right.
They might have some contingencies that factor into that. It doesn't mean you cut them out of the dialogue in the future, because they could still be a partner in the future on something different, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's and that's part of the model is and like I said, in 2009 there wasn't a lot going on. It was the IRF office at state, it was the USERF, and then it was the roundtable in 2009, and it's built into this a number of mechanisms, the ministerial, the summit, and their secretariat, and there's and that the space is much more participatory. So whereas there was a very narrow band of different religious minorities, there's now a wide band, and so and people come in closer and farther in orbit now, depending on what their agenda is and
Yeah.
how they're working with different agencies, international organizations, and so forth. But it's an amazing space. I mean, it's the challenge is that it's like here you were out, and then and now and you're
They
like, how do
pulled
I
me
get
back
back in?
in.
Well, it's I mean, it's clearly a fetish, right? Like it's a small space. It's difficult to operate in. There's not a lot of funding.
It's
It is
not
a growth.
easy. Yeah.
It's a growth industry in the sense that prostitution's on the rise. So there's a lot of strange sort of aspects to it. Plus, there's the other component is that you're interacting with different multi-faith communities,
Yeah.
and multi-faith and non-faith communities all over the world, and you are affecting individuals, in life and death situations,
Yeah. And
quite a bit, quite often, and so the wins are profound.
Yeah, and to give listeners a kind of a sense of the pace of these meetings that you're familiar with and I'm familiar with, we have a 2-hour meeting on Monday, and about an hour of that will be civil society, at least. But all these agenda items are limited to either 3 minutes or 1 minute.
Sure.
And it's a packed full agenda. So that's the kind of pace that this room moves in, which is, again, when you have that kind of diversity in a room, that kind of pace is remarkable in itself, right? And so it's like there are a lot of people at the table that you're trying to get in, and not everybody will get on the agenda every meeting, but we cram as much possible content
it's a lot.
and opportunities into those meetings as possible.
And it might be the most regular multi-faith gathering on the planet. I mean, that's that. With that such diversity.
That's probably true. Yeah.
And so there's a fantastic sort of component to it. But in any event, I think that there's now that we're in the middle of legislative session, or we're in the middle. We're talking about. I know there's some religious freedom legislation up, and there's all kinds of other stuff. What's the agenda to the end of the year, to year end, for the Secretariat, and for you as as an individual who came on board and now is like hit the ground running?
Yeah. So one of the big things that's on our kind of the big boulder of a schedule item on the calendar is a gathering in Prague that is hosted under the auspices of the President of the Czech Republic, and that's what they call. You mentioned the ministerials before. The ministerials are typically, leaders from State Department level type folks from different countries. They're calling this a high level meeting because it's actually trying to attract presidents, heads of state to this particular meeting. And they get at least one other participant, and so there are a number of countries who are participating in that. The details are still coming together, but it's hosted at the Prague Castle, and I've never been there, but that looks like it's going to be an exciting time, and we're going to host a live from Prague roundtable while we're there. So that's going to be it's a side event for civil society participants, and then kind of alongside the formal program for government participants. But we're the IRF Secretariat is the prime sponsor for that event, and so that's kind of the anchor on our horizon for our time and attention, aside from the domestic roundtables here.
When is it? When you guys hosting it?
Prague is November 12th and 13th, and we have side events basically from the 11th to the 14th. So like a reception the evening before and a strategy session after. And one of the things that our participants and sponsors will do is engage in basically a joint strategic planning process, which is part of the challenge. And I know as part of Greg's vision for religious freedom is that we have a lot of advocacy folks, right? A lot of organizations, but there's really no cohesive strategy. And IRF Secretariat is trying to gather that, kind of convene enough folks to have some sort of strategy for actually making a dent in reversing this trend of religious freedom violations.
So I mean, so there's we do, in addition to the normal events that we have, like there's sort of like the one that's happening on Monday. There's the global events that you guys are kicking off, and one's coming in November. So it's a lot of moving and shaking to try to make things happen, and it's difficult because you're reacting in large part to global events that may change the environment, in many cases when it comes to religious communities all over the world. So it's not easy to kind of get your arms around the events as they are happening when things become kinetic. So
and there's and we're not the only ones in the space, right? We collaborate with the Article 18 Alliance, which is it's a loose coalition of 43 countries who really care about this stuff. So it's not just the U.S. It's a lot of European countries and others who care about religious freedom. And so you have you really kind of have this dynamic of not only of to use our friend Chris Seipel's words, top down, meaning government to civil society, and then also civil society up to government, this top down, bottom up kind of scenario. But the other component of this that Greg's really trying to draw together is cross sector or multi-sector collaboration, which includes not just government and civil society, but also business, communities, entrepreneurs, people who have a vision and ideas for innovation, like you, and Muslims for Muslims created the IRF, an IRF AI, right? Analyzer, and so you're already looking at technology, and so the religious freedom movement, if it's going to be successful, is not going to be merely governments or merely civil society advocates, but it's really got to be cross-sector, including government, including civil society, including religious, faith communities, including philanthropy. We need philanthropists in that community to really come alongside and support a lot of this work, because as you say, there's not a whole lot of money in religious freedom advocacy.
Right.
And so I think you and I have seen enough. There's enough talent and expertise in the religious freedom community broadly across faiths and around the globe, and then to the point that business communities and philanthropy folks can resource that talent. There's some great gains to be had.
Yeah, no, I think it's you gotta the problem is you gotta get yourself out there. That's the problem, is you gotta hold the meetings, and whatever happens at the meetings, like things get presented at the meetings that that mean you have to react, but then that also, it's sort of that, to use sort of the Christian parlance, the idea of a big tent, right, where that invites people, and so you bring those people in. I don't know if that's the right term, but the idea is that if there is an entity that meets regularly, there is an entity that represents this issue regularly, then you can bring people in that will have confidence that whatever agenda or whatever funding they bring in or whatever it will be used with its integrity for the intended purpose, and that's the idea. And so, and the structures were, it's like I said, a long time coming. I mean, there was an informal group in 2009, and now there's the Secretariat in 2025 that was, I think, formed in. I don't know, when was it formed?
It's like 2019, I think.
2019,
2020.
It was a
2019.
The founding board member, and back, and I spent about a year trying to get the structures together before I ended up going into the foray of some international work where I was able to just kind of step out. But it's been a long time coming, and so.
That you folks like you and I who've you worked in that a long time and see it grow over 15 years. Like, we kind of take a lot of the uniqueness for granted, but you take someone who has no idea the roundtable or anything like it exists, and they get to like sit in it either live or even see it remotely on Zoom. The people are probably profoundly moved. They're like, wow. This is pretty remarkable stuff, including, even leaders of countries. Right.
Well, and they're there talking with everybody on just like you and I are speaking, and like that's why it was just so funny. Like, the podcast is now as an outcrop of that, right? Yeah. So, and you and I, like I said, people would say that we hate each other off air, but the reality is that we have built. It's not extraordinary for two people of like different faiths to be friends and colleagues and to have a relationship as a result of this interaction, because we're dealing with all these big issues. And then to bring people in, it does become, we do lose some of that magic because we've been doing it for so long. So, but yeah, so what's next? So we talked about what's next on the
agenda. My one miss for the roundtable on Monday, we need to make this happen at a future roundtable, is we need to get some of Johnny Pinna's babka
We can do some babka diplomacy
at a future roundtable. Like I think
well,
that's missing. We cater the thing with at least coffee and water, maybe something more. But at one of these roundtables, we need to get like a mass quantity of Pinna's babka.
Well, I will have to talk about that. I mean, how many people do you think are going to be coming on Monday? And then maybe I can zip out that way.
I mean, we make a catering order for 80 people. I'm not sure we'll actually have that, but that's the scope of it.
Okay.
But don't force it for Monday. But at a future gathering,
we'll have to do some diplomacy.
We got to figure out how to make that a feature. That would be fun.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. It means a lot, and I think that we've, I think it's important for us to we're going to have you back on the show and co-host some of this stuff that we're doing now that you're back in orbit. And but I appreciate taking the time to spend with us and let kind of go over some of our backstory and then the Earth story, the Earth movement, and kind of how it's gone from point A to point B to point C, and now. Anybody can participate, and we'll put in the show notes, how to participate and get more people involved.
Yeah, it's really easy to find, just irfroundtable.org. It's a pretty easy place to find, and you can register to participate and get more information there.
Nice. Well, thank you, Matthew. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite back, Pinna. It's been great.
Absolutely.